Hello, I'm Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to the live stream version of the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And I'm very thankful for all of you who have chosen to join with me today. I'll be repeating the show's name and who I am, since I suspect people will be tuning in at different times. For those of you who are tuning in, it's starting at 5 o'clock, and we're going to be ending at 5:45, 5:45 Eastern Time. And I want to tell you about what the show is about. The show is about helping individuals, you, your organizations, your communities, your families, and others to meet life's challenges, to help you successfully negotiate the whitewater of emotional experiences that many of us are feeling these days. There's so much change, so much conflict and polarization. If you read the headlines, a lot of what the news brings us is depressing, sad, causes us to feel angry and concerned. And also in people's lives at home or in their workplaces, there are a lot of challenges that show up daily under normal circumstances, where sometimes it's hard to make a decision or to have a conversation that's going to be dealing with a conflict that's arisen between you and another person that's important to your ability to get things done. And what is it that might be an answer to all the changes that are accelerating in today's world for us? We're dealing with the new role of artificial intelligence. At some point, quantum computing is going to take a leap. Robotics. What is it going to mean for us as workers? How is it going to impact the way things get done? We're going to have cars that drive themselves soon. So some of the technology is empowering. It allows us to do other things, maybe be more strategic. But in many cases, it's creating fear and doubt and uncertainty. Well, as you address all the different issues in our lives, whether on a national level or on a local level, something very close to you in your workplace or at your home or in your community, one of the ways that I've found that really helps people is to be smarter about their emotions. We hear a lot of people talk about empathy and how important empathy is to the way we get along with one another. And you can actually measure empathy by looking at the way people are able to understand, to what level they can understand successfully what another person is feeling. Some people have what they call emotional empathy. Well, we all have it, but some of us have it at a very high degree, others in the middle, and some not very much at all. But that's where we actually feel what somebody else feels. You may experience a workplace, for instance, where you walk in and you notice, without really talking to anyone, that everyone seems quite quiet and fearful about maybe saying anything to you or to each other. Or you might sense a feeling of anger. Maybe someone's just announced a large-scale change that's going to have a dramatic impact on a lot of people. And people didn't know much about it, and what they're hearing is making them very unhappy. In any case, any change, any conflict, any decision that's going to have a major impact on people, particularly people you care about, where some are going to be very happy about what you choose and others are going to be quite upset. All those things involved the ability to understand how what you're going to do has an impact on other people's emotions and feelings. So I want to talk to you today about what this emotion roadmap is that I've created to help people to deal with all of this. I think it's really important for all of us to understand that if we're more empathetic, if we're kinder, more caring, more responsive, more understanding, more compassionate, that's going to go a long ways to helping us with our relationships. It's going to help us also to make better decisions, perhaps, and also to deal more effectively with change and conflict. But how do you do it? What's the answer to all the polarization in the world, all the massive depression that so many people are experiencing, or the shootings that are taking place, not just in our country, but there seems to be violence across the world? And because we're live streaming on YouTube, I know that I've got listeners from different continents, and I welcome everybody. And I know that for some of you it's quite late and some quite early, and for others somewhere what you might consider to be a normal late afternoon time. So we're going to be on at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesdays. That's the day we're picking. And we have to set up a schedule that's going to allow us to meet somewhat regularly, and we'll be announcing the schedule at a later time. But this is our first shot at this. And I want you to know that people who are watching this show right now can call in. My radio show, I'll tell you about it in a minute, has a history of being very successful in callers who have called in and asked for some help with life challenges that they're facing, that they want to know if I can be helpful. And I just a bit about me. In my background, you will find if you do any search, I actually Googled myself, or I looked with Gemini and Copilot today, and I asked, what's Chuck Wolf's background and reputation? It came out quite nice, fortunately. But what I want to tell you about me is I've had some experiences where I've been a family therapist over the years. So I've dealt with families, and I understand the family dynamics and family systems. But I also spent time at Harvard many years ago learning about organization behavior and worked with a very brilliant man named Tony Athos, who is one of the smartest men on the planet about how organizations behave, how people feel inside organizations, what changes feelings, what do leaders do that make people connect with them, that create engagement and motivation and inspiration. And so I've had some wonderful opportunities where I've been in family dynamics training, in organization behavior training, and I've worked as a school counselor. I've actually helped parents and administrators and teachers and kids deal with their feelings. So I've had a lot of experiences over many years working as a leadership coach, as an organization behavior consultant, with some of the best well-known firms in the world, including working at some of the best colleges and with the military and the Coast Guard and the Navy and the Army and all kinds of experiences. So when somebody calls me, I have a lot to draw on. And one of the things that makes me happiest is if I can be helpful to somebody. If I can help make your life a little better because you called in and I was able to use what I've constructed that I call an emotion roadmap to make your life better somehow, help you with that decision you need to make, help you figure out a better way to manage the conflict that you're facing, help you to deal with the changes you're experiencing. If I can do that for you, it gives me the greatest pleasure. And that's why I continue to do this, even at this late stage in my own life. I find I'm really good at helping people, and I want as many people as possible to learn what I've learned about emotional intelligence. And while I told you about a few experiences that I've had that have led me to this place where I think I can be helpful to really almost anybody that calls. Because what I find about people who are stuck or uncertain or doubtful about what's going on in their lives is that there's almost always something emotional happening inside of them. It's something internal that they're struggling with, or it has to do with something with someone that they have to care about. And I say have to care about because sometimes in the workplace, it's not necessarily somebody you like or even respect, but sometimes you got to work through that person or those people to get what you need done. But often it's also in your families with people that you love. But for some reason, you and the other person or people don't see eye to eye on a certain issue. And so you want to try and make it right with them somehow. And so you're wondering about how do I talk about a topic that's just been really problematic to address somehow with them in the past. And yet you feel you need to have that conversation again. How do you do it in a way that's emotionally intelligent? So you're thoughtful about how they're feeling and how you want them to feel and what would help them feel the way you would like them to feel instead of what's likely to happen, at least in terms of the way you're thinking about what's going to happen. So let me tell you a little bit about my experience with emotional intelligence. A number of years ago, I was working in New York City on Park Avenue in a place that was a high-end outplacement firm where a lot of the people in the 1980s were being laid off because they were struggling with large concerns that their companies had about just they weren't having good experiences in the marketplace. They had to lay off a lot of people that were high paid. And that went into the 90s even. And around 1995, I got involved in working at a firm called Harris McCulley. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was a high-end outplacement firm, and they dealt with people in the financial services industry, places like Merrill Lynch, uh, Bank of America, a lot of Wall Street firms. Anyway, all of these people were making a lot of money, and they were being laid off. And my goal in my work with this firm was to offer the firm not only outplacement services for these people, but help with organizational consulting, help with change management, help the company after layoffs to kind of rebound and rebrand and grow again and make for an inspiring workplace even after all these layoffs happened. And so my experience took me to a place where I was working, and I became very well known for being able to take theoretical models and make them operational, make them active, help people to implement what we were learning in the universities and make it actually come alive in a real workplace. And I took that knowledge, and I was really successful with my career at that point. And one of the people that also worked at this firm heard about me and asked me to help him with Peter Salovey and Jack Mayer's work on emotional intelligence. The person was David Caruso. And he asked me, he said, Chuck, can you come and help us by taking the work that we've discovered? Peter Salovey actually is now a psychology professor again at Yale University, but had been the president of Yale for 10 years. And Jack Mayer is a University of New Hampshire psychologist, both really brilliant people that have done amazing work in uncovering and discovering the field of emotional intelligence. And they asked me, could I come and help them take the theoretical models and make them come alive? And I was excited at the opportunity, and I went to work with them, and I found the work was really challenging and really exciting because it was the first time in psychology that something new had arrived that was really substantive and meaningful. And I ran with it. And one of the things that happened was, as I looked at their academic research, how powerful it was and how compelling. And I had a background to understand it, but I also knew that most people would read their work and not really know what to do with it. And that's why they asked me on. And I came up with this concept of an emotion roadmap. And what I understood was that when they looked at emotional intelligence, they said there's 4 different abilities, and they're measurable. One is the ability to be aware of how other people feel and to do it somewhat accurately so that you could make decisions based on what you thought you knew other people were feeling. Second was the use of emotions, that for certain tasks, the emotion you might be experiencing may not be appropriate or even may be an obstacle for what you're trying to get done, because there are certain emotions that are better for particular tasks than other emotions. So the use of emotion was important. And then understanding, how well do we understand how somebody else is feeling and why they're feeling that way? And finally, managing. How well do we manage our own emotions internally, as well as how do we manage the emotions of other people? Well, that's a lot that I'm talking about and a lot to say. But what I found was, if you looked at what they had discovered, we always have been talking about how important it is to be self-aware. Aristotle, I believe, was the first person to talk about it. We've been looking at psychology for years to try and understand why people feel the way they do. And as far as managing emotions, I think since caveman times, we've been trying to figure out how to get along with each other. So none of that was new. But the idea that it was ability-based was new, and that we could have different abilities, and those abilities mattered. So think, so remember, I was a family therapist, so I used to have husbands who were criticized by their wives in some of the family sessions I had. And it usually went the way I'm going to talk about it, not always, but the wife would say, my husband doesn't really know what I'm feeling, and I'm really feeling like he doesn't pay enough attention to me. He doesn't care enough about me to sense how I'm feeling. Now, some of you that might feel very familiar to you, I don't know, but it's possible that it does. But one of the things that I discovered with this new measurement of emotions that Peter and Jack and David were talking about was this idea that, what if somebody really couldn't identify how you felt, but if you told your husband how you were feeling and he didn't respond, then I think you have reason to have an issue. But if he just didn't know because his ability was really low, and he didn't really just get subtle cues, and that wasn't a strength of his, and it's measurable, and we found that out. And it wasn't about his bad attitude towards you, it was a lack of ability. That's essentially a game changer in my mind. If I look at you and I think you're not sensing how I feel, but you can't sense how I feel, then I'm going to say, hey, listen, this is how I feel, And if you then, oh, wow, I didn't know that, and you try to respond to that appropriately, I'm going to see life a lot differently than maybe I'm seeing it right now. So that was interesting. But the most interesting thing I found was that when you look at how you're feeling, most of us feel like it's a poker hand. You got to play the cards you were dealt as far as what you feel. And I said to myself, as I'm looking at the research that these other people were doing, that has to be changed. If I'm learning that there's a certain emotion that's better than maybe what I'm feeling for what I'm trying to get done, I want to know what's that emotion and how do I change to that? Can I actually change my feelings to better feelings, more ideal feelings that would be helpful for what I'm trying to do? And that's the heart of my emotion roadmap. That's what I created. I created this idea of saying to somebody who might call, and you're welcome to call me, by the way. I'm going to ask if anybody wants to call in just a moment. And you can see on the screen, there's a number to call, and then after the number, it'll ask you for a passcode, and you put the passcode in, and you hit the pound sign, and you'll be able to talk with me, and I'll be able to help you, or you can ask me questions about this. But anyway, I want to tell you that the roadmap is a simple procedure, but has profound impact. It has 4 questions. First, it starts with just tell me a bit about your circumstance and situation. Then I'm going to ask you, what is it you're feeling about the situation? And I'm going to ask you, is there anybody else that's key to making happen what you want to have happen? And what is he or she or they feeling? And then I'm going to ask this question about use of emotion. Well, if what you're feeling isn't helpful, and I'm going to suspect that it isn't, what would be ideal to feel? And then we together figure that out. And then we conceive of how do we get, this is the idea of a roadmap, how do we get from feeling whatever it is we might be feeling, let's say we're anxious and we want to feel confident, how do we make the change? How do we get ourselves to feeling less anxious and more confident if that's what we want? How do we do that? And then we explore understanding, which is how do emotions move? And how do emotions move for you? That's the art of emotional intelligence, not just the science. And then we make a plan. And then I ask you for the managing part, is it something that we've talked about that you're really able to do? And are you willing? 2 very different questions, both incredibly important. Because if you're able, you'd think, well, sure, if I'm able, I'm going to do it. Not always. I have found there are reasons, I won't go into this. We might experience them on the show, and you'll see it when it happens. But what I will tell you is what I found somebody isn't willing, even though it sounds like a strategy that would work, but they're not willing to do this. I found it non-productive to spend time trying to figure that out. Instead, what I'll say, well, how about some of the other things we talked about? Is there a strategy that you think is really powerful and compelling and you think is something that would work and you're really excited even, perhaps, to try it and to do it? And then we have a strategy that's sound, and what I call emotion-based problem solving. We have a strategy that's going to have a good chance for being successful. That's how it works. Now, I got to working with Peter, Jack, and David, and we created this, and I created this, what I called an emotion roadmap. And I've gone on and become a speaker and done a lot of different things with it. Used it in business and used it on personal development. Very excited about a number of things that are going on where we're using the emotion roadmap. But one of the things that I did came about through a friend of mine who became a friend. He wasn't a friend when I met him. He was just a graduate student in a class I taught at the University of Hartford, where I was teaching emotional intelligence in organizations to psychology's students. It was a psychology class in a graduate student for graduate students at the University of Hartford. And that class brought a person to me named Lou Pomalis. And if Lou's listening, maybe he'll call in a little bit. But Lou said, what you're doing with the emotion roadmap, and by the way, what I did in the class and what I do on the radio show now, but what I did in the class was I said, tell me about situations you're all facing. Tell me about some of the challenges you're facing, some of the conflicts you're facing, and let me show you how this emotion roadmap works. And I would demonstrate in the class, and then I would ask people to come in each class and to start the class talking to me about how have you used this emotion roadmap? How have you taken some place where you've been stuck, where you've been uncertain and doubtful, and use this process to make life better? And that's the goal for the show. My greatest goal in this point in my life is to help make life better for you as individuals, to make a meaningful, positive difference if I can. So that's the goal of the show. And that's how the emotion roadmap works. And that's how it came about. And now I'd like to just invite you, if you wanted, to call in. And what you might call in about is what I often deal with is workplace situations. I have found the emotion roadmap to be incredibly helpful at the management level, at the leadership level, for helping to implement new visions, helping to change, for transformational changes, for individual change, for coaching people that have certain behaviors that are problematic. The Emotion Roadmap has been wonderfully helpful in numerous kinds of situations in the workplace, but also at home with your families, in your communities, with your clubs, your religious institutions, the band you belong to, the sports team you're on. We all deal with emotions everywhere in our life. And often we just get along and things are fine. But once in a while, something comes up that's really important, and we want to embrace it and deal with it. And so I want to just stop and talk to you about what you might call about. And so it's possible to call about anything with leadership, with teams. How do you get people to follow you? How do you deal with that person that doesn't seem to want to take feedback and coaching? If you have a boss or leader or manager who's not particularly helpful and interested in you, how do you get his or her attention? How do you get them to care about you? How do you make yourself to be somebody that's noticed in the organization so that opportunities for promotion, your name is on the list of those being considered? How do you make all that happen? I think emotional intelligence is a big key to all of this, including giving you back some of the controls that you might feel are slipping away as artificial intelligence enters our world. As more and more people are engaged. And how many times have you seen people sitting around a table and everybody's not talking to each other, they're just looking at their phones? I think there's ways to get people to engage with each other more successfully, despite the fact that the phones are such a draw for us. So I would encourage you to think about if there's something you'd like to call in about, or just ask about the Emotion Roadmap of the show and so forth. I'm going to give you the number. I'm going to say it out loud, and you can see it on your screen. I'm going to ask you if you want to call in. By the way, as I understand it, this is going to be streaming in a way that people who call in and use the passcode can get to me online. And then if you hear somebody talking to me, I'd appreciate it if you don't call in until after that call is finished. So the number to call is 475-328-0773. 475-328-0773. Once you call, they'll ask you for a PIN, and I'll wait a moment to see if anybody's called in. I'll give you the PIN. I think you should be able to see it if you're watching on any kind of video stream. So the PIN is 480-070-228-pound. So I'll wait just a moment, and then I'll keep talking, because if somebody wants to call in, you'll be able to get me. Again, the number is 475-328-0773. And the PIN is 480-070-228-pound. And I'm going to be on the air till 5:45, so I've got about 20 minutes or so to talk with anybody that wants to give me a call. So if you want to call in, this would be a good time to do it. And I should be able to hear you right away when you call. In the meantime, I'd like to tell you what my goals are. Is I want to talk to you about how do you demonstrate more empathy for other people. That's one of the things I thought's important to say. So it's really interesting when you look at the skill set involved with empathy. You understand that there's two major parts to it. One is this intellectual empathy, which is, I get why you're feeling the way you do. I understand why you would feel that way. I understand why that's making you mad. Or I understand your sadness. Or that loss, of course you're grieving. I understand that. So that's intellectual empathy. Emotional empathy is, wow, something's not right. I can feel it. What's going on? When you go up to somebody you know and you may care about, and you want to ask and you really want to hear, boy, you seem upset, but they haven't said a word, and yet you just feel what they feel. And that's emotional empathy. Now, what's really interesting about empathy, and I give Dan Goleman credit for this, for introducing this guy to me. Anyway, Dan is a member of this consortium for emotional research on emotional intelligence and organization, and I'm a member too. And so I've gotten to know Dan and worked in this organization for a little bit on part of his coaching certification. But anyway, one of the things that Dan said in one of the meetings we were at was empathy is three things. And he said the same things about intellectual empathy and emotional empathy, but he also said it's empathic concern for others. And I thought, wasn't that a value choice? That's not really a skill set. But you know what? It doesn't matter, because what does matter is empathic concern for others makes all the difference. If you know how somebody feels, feel what somebody else feels, and you don't care how they feel, what difference does it make? But even if you're not good at understanding why somebody's feeling a certain way, and you're not necessarily feeling it strongly the way that they might be feeling it, but you care deeply about them and how they're feeling, that's the more authentic, meaningful part of empathy, is when you care about others. When you care about others. And empathy is fascinating for a number of reasons, but that's the biggest part I wanted to talk about today is if you are watching the show and you want to take something away from this, I'd like you to think about the fact that what matters most in relationships is when people really do care about each other. And don't just say those words, but they actually demonstrate it. They actually demonstrate it. And if you're wanting to know more about emotional intelligence, again, let me give you the number to call in case, because it'd be fun to get a phone call or two. The phone number to call in is 475 328 0773. 475 328 0773. And the PIN is 480 070 228 pound. Okay. Well, we've got the numbers. If you want to call in, that's how you do it. So anyway, the concept of really caring about another person doesn't come easily, and you can't really fake it. But I think if you want really excellent relationships with others, caring about another person authentically is what matters most. Not whether the skill set is high or not, but what matters most is that you really, really do care. That's something important to understand. And then one of the things that I think is really important to remember is, it comes from a Willie Nelson song that I listened to not too long ago. It said, treat everyone the way you want to be treated, as if it was the last day of your life. And the reason he says that is because one day you're going to be right. One day it is going to be the last day. So I think if you go into life every day thinking about, I want this to be a good day, not just for me, but for the people that I interact with. I want to be good for others and not just for myself. I want to make life better for those that, especially those that I say I love and care about. I don't want to just say those words. I want to actually make that happen. So trying to be the best possible version of yourselves. None of us are ever going to be perfect at it, but having that concept and that goal does make a difference. It helps you to be more forgiving and maybe less agitated with the person who didn't get it right when you first asked them to do something that you thought was important that they got done right away. But if you understand that maybe they tried, they didn't understand, maybe you weren't clear. One of my colleagues, Joanne Quinn, put in a LinkedIn post the other day, something I thought was really useful to think about. It was how to say things. Like, have you ever said to somebody, you don't get it, you don't understand me, you don't seem to get what I'm trying to tell you. What's wrong with you, right? Well, that's probably not going to get a warm response from anyone that you might say that to. Now, if they work for you, maybe you get away with that, but it doesn't build a relationship that's credible. It just says that you're power hungry and you're just telling people what you want them to do, and you're not really paying attention to why they might have missed what you said. Is it at all possible? And you could say it like this. Hey, I wasn't clear, I guess. It seems like you misunderstood what I meant, and it's probably, maybe I wasn't clear enough. Let me try it again. Let's go through this kind of step by step and see if I can explain it so it's really clear to you. Because perhaps I wasn't clear when we first spoke. Doesn't that change everything in terms of getting somebody to do it right the next time they try? I mean, there's just ways to say things. Have you ever said calm down to the person that you're a partner with? Or calm down to your boss maybe because he's yelling at you? Or to somebody else that's yelling and you're in the room with them and you say calm down, and what does it do to people? It makes them feel like defensive, doesn't it? I mean, sometimes people will, if they know you really care about them and that you're saying calm down and it's in their best interest to calm down, and this is a pattern that they have and they know they need to calm down, and you're just repeating something you've already agreed is okay, that's different. But when you just say calm down to somebody where you don't have that kind of agreement, instead of saying, hey, it sounds like you really care about this, let's see if we can break this down into simple steps that we talk about one at a time. What's the first thing that's really concerning you here, and what might we do about that? Instead of calm down, doesn't that change things for you? So the way you talk to people is important. And also trying to understand historically. One of the people I work with in a business context was someone who was looking at the idea that they were struggling with trying to get a change in leadership, a transformational experience for the organization they were part of. They were a large organization. They were a large hotel conference center, and they wanted to be competitive with the top flight organizations in the world. They wanted to compete with the markets where we're in, like London or Las Vegas or Orlando or New York City. Might be the top places for organizations to send their conventions or their large groups to have an experience where they get fed and taken care of, and they learn things, and they experience networking, and it's really high end, high level. They wanted to be in the conversations with the top players in the world, but they were in a southeastern state of the United States, and it wasn't a destination as highly recognized as the ones I just mentioned. And they were wanted to get their people's input about how could we grow our organization and transform into something more meaningful, more exciting, more powerful, more compelling, so that people wanted to come and visit us. It would talk about us, and would go out and be our highest points of confidence, and recommendation would come from the people that actually came here and visited with us and were entertained and fed and taken care of and felt gloriously about their entire experience being with us. So I had done a lot of work with emotional intelligence in the hotel and conference center industry, and I came down and I was invited in to help them to find out why their staff was not working collaboratively with them, and they wanted to do what they called a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats 2-day event. It's called a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to the organization. And so I came in and I said, well, why do you need me, number one? Because it seems like you've got people here that could do this for you. But they said, well, it's not working. We've tried it with our own people, and it wasn't working. I said, well, tell me about your experience here and give me a little history of the organization. Well, it turned out that their whole organization had changed over within the last 3 to 6 months, depending on which manager we're talking about. But almost their entire leadership team was new. And the past leadership team had been extremely autocratic and disempowering, and if people disagreed with the old leadership team, they were made fun of, they were criticized, sometimes they were let go right on the spot if they were critical of a senior leader in the past. And so this group came in and said, hey, that's that group, that's not us, we're different. But what the new group didn't recognize was that every team comes in and says we're different and we're going to be empowering and we have a vision for how we're all going to work together collaboratively, and it's all going to be great. And then sometimes it is, and sometimes it's what people experience, which was, no, it wasn't all the things you promised. It was nothing like what you said. And so when something like that happened, I said to them, I can see why your people, the ones that are left, aren't speaking up and saying what they think is weaknesses or threats, because they're afraid. And, probably the smart ones that are left here are afraid for good reason. Why would they trust you when the group before you were saying something very similar? Well, to make a long story short, I encouraged them to think differently about this. Whether they used me or not didn't matter, but I said, you have to really look at this and say, create a vision of the future. Don't talk about the past. Ask them what they want. Ask them what would be compelling for them to be a part of. What would be exciting for customers to really enjoy and go away talking about how wonderful their experiences was as their properties. What would make that real? And what would make that real for you as employees that work here? How do we make it real for you that this is an amazing place for you to work and for you to come in every day, and you can't wait to get up and come to work in the morning or the afternoon or the evening, depending on what shift you have? And so we began looking at what would it take to make life better for everyone, so that all the people in the organization now would, once they said, this is what we all want, and we spent 6 months doing this, not 2 days, 6 months, and we created something really powerful and compelling, and they went for it. They created something that they all felt excited about. And then from that vision and mission statements, we began to look at, well, what's holding us back and what's pushing us ahead. And then we began to look at weaknesses and threats and strengths and opportunities. And that's when we were able to get real information that everybody was excited about, because we all had this compelling vision of where we were all headed. So that's another way to take the emotion roadmap and make it work, is to look at what are people feeling organizationally and how do we get them to look and feel different. Well, I've got about 10 minutes left, so I do want to give the number again. And again, I'm Chuck Wolf. The show's the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And if you want to call in and share a little bit about your thoughts about what you're hearing or something that you're concerned about that you'd like to get some help with, this is our first time with this, and we'll keep trying and see if we get people to call in. And the way you call in is you dial the number on your screen, 475-328-0773. And once you call in, you'll be asked for a PIN or a passcode, and that is 480-070-228, and then the pound sign. So I hope we get a call. It'd be nice to get a call on this first time around. So anyway, so this Emotion Roadmap, I had this going on for a while. I was teaching this in this Emotional Intelligence Organizations course, and one of the people that I had as a class was a 52-year-old man who had come back to school, decided he wanted to get his master's, and he went to school and he was in my class, and he loved this Emotion Roadmap. And he came up to me after class one day. He said, "Chuck, would you consider going on the radio?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "The way you're helping us in class, by us telling you what's going on in our lives in places where we're kind of stuck and not sure how to proceed, and you're walking us through, okay, how do you feel? What would be ideal to feel? How do we get from what you are feeling to what's ideal to feel? And from there, planning emotionally what we want to have happen next. And then really helping us change lives to the better. Could you do that on the radio? Could you? I mean, you seem like you do it really fast, and you'd have a show maybe for an hour or two or something, and people would call in, and you'd take 5 minutes maybe to get what they were dealing with, and then you'd walk them through this roadmap. And then everybody that's listening is learning about the roadmap as you're helping individuals. And that's our community, and we're there to educate and provide innovative ideas and thoughts and sounds, and that's part of our mission statement, and we'd love to have you on the air. What do you think? So I've been on the air for 16 years doing this show. I got to tell you, one of the nicest things that I heard in recent times was, I always thought tactically I'm being helpful to people on the phone with a crisis that they're facing or a conflict that they're dealing with or a decision they have to make. And I'm listening to them, and I'm thinking, basically, here's what I'm hearing. Does that sound right? So first I want to make sure I hear you right. And so then tell me what you think you want to feel different than how it is you are feeling. And again, if there's someone else that's key to this, and maybe I hear in the story there's one or two people that might be really important to the story, and I say, how is John feeling? How is the boss feeling? How is the peer feeling? How is the person who works for you feeling? How do you want them to feel? What could we do to open up the conversation with this person to get them to start feeling the way you want them to feel instead of how they're likely feeling when they come into the meeting with you? And we kind of go through that together, and that's what we've been doing. So I thought, well, that sounds great. And I've been helping people for a long time now, 16 years the show's been running. And I asked people, just to let me know it from time to time. If you've had a good experience and you want to let us know what worked, call me back. I can't say that a lot of people call me back, but I did occasionally get people to call back. And one time, I got this one person to call me, and he said, "Chuck," he said, "how long have you been on the air?" This is a couple of years ago. And I said, "I was 14 years I've been on the air." He said, "That sounds about right." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I had a baby boy 13 years ago." And he told me his name, and he said, "And my son's now 13 years old. And I raised him listening to you and listening to your show. And he's a great kid, and I just wanted to thank you for that." So that was probably one of the nicest things I ever heard on the radio, really. I mean, to think that some of the things that I've learned about helping people deal with what's going on inside themselves, helping people understand that being thoughtful about how others are feeling can make a huge difference. when you're trying to help and shape and influence those you care about, those that you love, and those that you have to work with and just be a part of. So I hope that all of you, as you're listening, are getting some idea that it's really important to begin to think about how do you want to feel? Not just how you are feeling, but how do you want to feel? And don't just stop at you. One time I was educating somebody, and he worked as an organization consultant inside Yale University, actually, at the time. So before I was doing a lot, I've actually worked for Yale myself. But he had a full-time job with Yale. And he was saying, Chuck, I actually wanted to call you and tell you that I found something you really taught me about being smarter about how I feel to be really effective. And he told me about it. And he said, Chuck, this is what happened. My wife and I, sometimes if we argue, I sometimes just go and I go quiet. I don't talk to her. I don't say anything. And instead of being passive aggressive like that, I realized that I needed to say what was on my mind and get it out so I would feel better than what I was feeling anytime I would do this. And he told me that, and I said something to my wife and I explained how I was feeling, and then it worked out much better. And I just wanted to thank you for that. And I said, Ernie, that's great that you told me that, but you only got half of it right. He said, what do you mean? I said, did you ask how she was feeling and how she wanted to feel? It's really important not to forget the second part of this, folks. It isn't just about you. It's about how others feel that you care about, that you say you love, and you want to really, really validate and make them feel loved and appreciated and valued by you. Okay, I think, let's see. I've got 4 minutes left, so I'll repeat. This is called, I'm Chuck Wolf. The show is called The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. I'm really appreciative of Simsbury Media, where I'm hosting this show. It's in Simsbury, in Connecticut, and we're having the show live stream, so people can watch it. I hope that I get phone calls the next time. Maybe people tried and it didn't work. I don't know. But I do want to say thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this first show. It's been a pleasure to be on with you. I hope you found something valuable of the things that I've talked about. And I will encourage you over the next time before we meet again, and probably in a couple of weeks we'll try this again, and I'll let people know as best I can. But I would like to say that one of the things that you can do for yourself to learn more about how emotions are impacting your life is to spend the next couple weeks at 10, at 2, and at 7, particularly for those of you that have outside jobs and are working outside of the home. At 10, it's probably mid-morning for most of you, 10:30. And if you ask yourself, how am I feeling? Is it how I want to feel? Just ask those questions, right? How am I feeling? And this is how I want to feel. Because one of the things I think many of us will find, as you do this, many of you will find, because I've done this and I found this, is that by 10:30, you may be chasing rabbits down rabbit holes, not intentionally, but whatever you thought you were going to get done, by the morning before lunchtime, you may not have gotten nearly enough of that done or even started it yet because you got consumed by something else that caught your attention. And maybe that's okay and maybe it isn't. Chances are there'll be times when it isn't and you want to get back on track. Same thing about 2:30, mid-afternoon, before you go home. That's something you want to check with yourself and ask the same questions. How am I feeling? How did I want to feel? If it's not how you feel, how are you feeling? If it's not how you want to feel, just ask yourself that question. If it's not, then see if you can do something about it. And then finally, when at nighttime around 7 p.m., again, this can vary depending on your actual schedule, but around 7 p.m., chances are many of you are sitting at home, but are you really present at home? Or are you still kind of consumed by what you're thinking about that happened during the day at work? And again, you may want to just say, hey, at 7 p.m., I'm checking how I'm feeling. I'm not feeling like I'm here. I say I love my family. I care for my kids. I love my spouse, my partner, and I don't really show up for them if I'm thinking about work, even when I'm present in the home. I'm not really present emotionally. See if you can make those changes, and life will be better for you. And then we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay. I want to say thanks to everybody. I want to say thanks to Cole, who set this up for me. And it's 5:44, so this is time to say goodbye. Again, I'm Chuck Wolf. You can learn more about me if you want at www.emotionroadmap.com. And I look forward to being with you again. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. For all of those of you who could tune in, I appreciate it. And I welcome your comments, however you can connect with me. Thanks. Bye-bye now.